A collection of Australia's leading transport, health and planning groups has a bold new plan to fix Australia's infrastructure problems. They'd like to see governments consider a range of options from staggering school times to congestion charges. Their new report warns that transit problems cost the national economy a whopping at $9 billion a year. Our guest tonight is from one of those transport organisations. We're joined from Canberra now by the Executive Director of the Bus Industry Confederation, Michael Apps. Michael, thanks for joining us.
No, not a problem.
$9 billion, that is a staggering figure. How do you work that out? How do you work out that congestion is costing us that much money?
Well, actually, the figure for 2013 is actually $14 billion. That figure of $9.4 billion is from 2005, and that figure is actually worked out by the Bureau of Transport and Regional Economics, and what it's based on primarily is productivity losses that have been determined.
Michael, well, I'm sorry we have to interrupt you there. We just have to interrupt the drum to go live now to a media conference. Let's go back now to Michael Apps. He's the Executive Director of the Bus Industry Confederation. Michael, sorry to cut you off there, but I believe you've actually had some dealings with Adam Giles. What can you tell us about Adam Giles?
Oh, well, he's been a young up-and-comer for a while. We'd had dealings with him as Shadow Minister for Transport. I was actually recently with him in Perth. And he's always been very savvy, he's smart across his portfolio. I was actually planned to have a dinner with him on the 16th of April in Darwin during a visit when he was as Transport Minister. It'll be interesting to see if he can find time now he's the Chief Minister, but I think he'll do a good job.
All right, well, let's go back to the report that's been released today. We were talking about congestion, the impact it's having on the economy. It's costing $9 billion to the economy, according to your report. What kind of changes would you like to see when it comes to flexibility in work hours and also school hours?
Yeah, well, the report does look at flexibility in work hours and staggering school start and finishes times as two suggestions that we think are worth considering. The report is really recommends a whole range of ideas, policies and programs that we think the Commonwealth Government, working with state governments, need to seriously address. I think the reality is the challenges of our cities can't just be done by the states, and traditionally a lot of the issues that relate to transport have been seen as state-based issues. I have to admit that this federal government has done more than any other federal government in the context of policies in relation to urban development in our cities through their national urban policy and also through investment in public transport infrastructure. But there certainly needs to be a lot more done to actually address the challenges of congestion, the challenges of transport emissions and climate change, to address the issues of social exclusion out in our outer metropolitan areas where families are being forced to own 2 or 3 cars because they're not provided with adequate public transport choices. So the report's broad-ranging, and we're calling on each of the political parties running into the election, but more importantly whoever's in government after the election, to really have a strong focus on these urban issues and planning issues that, as I've said, have traditionally been state issues, but it's clear they can't do the job alone.
And Michael, certainly there's a real social cost if you're sitting in traffic for an hour and a half and not getting to see your family members as well. I'm wondering if this has been trialled elsewhere around the world, of moving school times, of work hours, and if so, has it worked?
Well, as far as we know, the staggering school start time and finish times, actually, we can't find any evidence of it happening around the world. We are aware of some schools in Adelaide, in particular areas where there's a cluster of schools that have determined that they will stagger their start and finish times, and they've put forward the view that it actually has improved the congestion in and around the schools. I guess what we're saying is that that's just one program or one policy that we think is required out of a whole suite of policies to address the challenges of congestion. Obviously, you mentioned congestion charging, which is a contentious one.
Well, let's talk more about that one, Michael. You'd like to see a trial. How would we do that? What would we do with a congestion trial, tax trial?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess we need to look, first of all, at international experience, and the 5 success stories in the context of congestion charging have been London, Singapore, Milan, San Diego and Stockholm, and all of them are largely based on, I guess, a cordon-type arrangement where when the vehicle crosses into the CBD area, wherever that line might be drawn, there's a charge applied. But what all of those capital cities have done is actually, before they implemented the congestion charge, they actually worked vigorously and hard at improving their public transport networks, and guaranteed that the money that was collected from the congestion charge would go back into transport infrastructure and improved services. And that included pedestrian and cycling pathways, so people actually also had that option. So in order to get acceptance of congestion charging from the community, the first step is you've got to provide an alternative. There's no point just trying to penalise people who simply want to drive to work into the city. So we think it's got merit. Ken Henry in the Australian Taxation Review has identified that congestion charging, a more comprehensive road pricing regime that looks at roads like other utilities such as electricity and water are things we need to consider to make sure that we've got the funds in the future to invest in transport and other infrastructure.
And Marius and Sue, these goes back to the issues we were talking before about no new taxes. Bringing in a congestion tax, I would imagine, would be quite tough politically.
I don't think we're going to be getting serious discussion about it between now and September 14.
Yeah, Julia Gillard was talking about big new motorway into the middle of Sydney and no toll, so it's hardly the direction she's indicating.
All right, let's talk about high-speed rail. Michael, what are your thoughts on that and the impact that could have on reducing congestion?
Well, I guess the task force is, as a group, has agreed that high-speed rail is a project worth further investigation. Clearly, the cost of it is a big issue and we need to work out where it fits in the priority of infrastructure projects. But in the context of congestion, we think that clearly wherever high-speed rail actually runs, the regional towns that it will pass through or nearby it along the way are going to grow, because we would believe that it's going to make the daily commute much quicker between, say, Berrima outside Sydney, or Goulburn, for example, to Sydney, and this will see people relocating and ease some of the pressure that actually we're going to see running into 2020, when the population is expected to increase by 5 million, and most of those people it's thought will actually be moving into our capital cities. So we need to work out mechanisms and ways to actually try and disperse the population, but at the same time provide them the option that's actually going to still get them to work and home in time.
Michael, high-speed rail would cost massive amounts in infrastructure, though, wouldn't it?
Oh, certainly. I mean, it's a massive project, and it's a massive dollars. But we think it needs to be in the mix, and it needs to be considered in the context of prioritising the infrastructure projects that are going to give Australia and each capital city and our region the best bang for their buck. And it certainly needs to be considered. The task force thinks that, it's a worthwhile project and should go ahead, but we've got to find the money. And that means we've got to actually try and start to think more broadly as well about innovative funding mechanisms to actually generate that future revenue.
What kind of thing? What kind of suggestions have you got when it comes to funding such a massive piece of infrastructure like high-speed rail down the east coast of Australia?
Well, I guess to begin with, things like value capture and actually making sure that where properties or suburbs or developments are occurring, that the local, state and federal government actually capture some of that increased value that emerges. It shouldn't just all go to the developer. We need to actually start to look at things like that. We need to look at things like tax incremental financing, where local government can actually borrow against its expected future rate incomes. These are issues that have been addressed through COAG and their finance working group. The 8 national organisations agree. It's clear we need to have a strong focus on this. I guess one of the big things we think that could change the way we do things is a full-blown road pricing arrangement, which effectively would see the federal government remove fuel excise, which would reduce fuel by 38 cents per litre. We'd see state governments remove registrations fees, for example, and then a per kilometre charge would apply to the use of your car based on the time of day and where you're driving. And we think this actually would provide car drivers the option to make the decisions about when they drive the car, where they drive their car. And this actually ultimately, for those who want to drive their car in peak periods, will have to pay it, and this will generate future revenues.
Michael, we'll have to leave it there, but thanks very much for talking to us tonight on The Drum.
Thank you.